Are you overwhelmed, or are you curious, or are you having questions about your July garden? Tune in now and I'll answer all your questions. I promise. Hello and welcome to Down the Garden Path podcast. Thanks for joining me here today. And I'm excited to talk all about July in your garden. Considering we are already in July, I'm sure you're curious to know some of the things that you need to do this month. So thank you for listening to this podcast, but I also have my book and the month of July. So my book is all laid out for what to do in your garden each month. So that's something to consider if that's easier to have with you versus listening to this podcast. But either way, thanks for joining me here. And let's talk about July. So this has been a crazy one. We started off, we think even like the 1st or 2nd of July with like a ton of rain and a ton of heat. And with our later spring, I don't know about your garden, but I have found that many things were behind and still are behind. My little quickfire hydrangeas, if you know me, you know that's my favorite hydrangea. It blooms the earliest. It blooms mid-June reliably, except for this year. It's July 7th and it's just budding. So it will be the first hydrangea in my garden to bloom, but later, about 3 weeks later than usual. So things are a little bit behind, but that's okay. They eventually catch up. And, it's great that we had all that extra water from Mother Nature. And especially when we had that intense heat for a few days. So who knows what the rest of the month will bring. So that's why I'm here to help you figure that out. So if you do have perennials in your garden that have already bloomed, obviously you do, any of your spring blooming perennials, early season perennials, doing a good deadhead could get you additional blooms later in the season. So if your salvia has finished blooming, your catmint has finished blooming, penstemon, any of the other perennials in your garden that have finished blooming, you can go ahead and deadhead them, give them a good deadhead, even cut them back quite harshly, and you'd be surprised at how they reward you with a second flush. It's also a good time to look if you've got damaged leaves, things like coral bells. They can look good for most of the season, but sometimes some of their leaves look a little bit more discolored and dried up. And I don't really use coral bells for their flower, but they do flower. And so if those little stems are finished blooming or looking a little, giving them a cut back and a cleanup can really, really extend the season of any of your perennials. But if you're happy and you really don't want to do much to your garden, hence my love of a low maintenance garden, then don't worry about it. Everything will come back again next year, and you don't need to do a thing to ensure that it will, as long as you water. So water, we will talk about water in a little bit, but I did want to talk about your perennials and just realizing that you can there's some perennials that won't, my irises, how much I love my striped white irises. They won't bloom again, so I'm going to cut the stems back. But that's why I like the striped white one or the striped cream one, because it's green and cream, the leaves, because when it's finished blooming, it still looks interesting in the garden. It still adds a different texture as opposed to just the plain green irises, and those leaves just get lost amongst all the other green. So I'd highly recommend the variegated irises. So things like irises, they're not going to rebloom in your garden, one and done type of thing. So if there are some things that you think, give it a shot. Our phlox there's still lots to come and bloom in your garden. So it's not like it's a necessity. So that's something to remember. The other thing I want to talk about with this weird season and I think higher, I don't know the stats, but I feel like we've had more rain than usual and in a short period of time. And I noticed from just walking my neighborhood and a little bit from my own garden too, is the weeds are incredible. They are growing. I think they loved the rain and they loved they grow in the drought, which is always annoying, but they really like the rain and the heat. So definitely keep an eye on your own garden and get on top of those weeds, especially before they go to seed. But I also suggest like watching neighboring properties and things like that because the weeds blow in. And so some of the really aggressive weeds, and I will have some pictures up on social media so you can take a look, like like the bellflower, and it's such a pretty plant, and I have a long funny story about it early in my gardening career. I loved it, and I shared it with friends, and then realizing, it's very, very invasive, and once you have it, you can't get rid of it. So, really keeping an eye, and if you see it in like the pathways or the boulevards of, even if it's just your neighbor's boulevard, I mean, it does look pretty. It is purple. It's flowering. It's bell-shaped and tall. Pull it out. One, it's way easier to get it out when it's blooming. Oddly, I don't know why, but it comes out, the root comes out. But when it's not blooming early in the season, late in the season, I don't know, those roots hold on forever. So anything that you see that you're not sure of, if it's starting to flower and it looks like it's a weed, and whether it's in your garden or at the boulevard or um, get on top of it, because those weed seeds, once it goes to seed, they're really hard to get rid of, and they really can be a challenge. So this is the time of year to watch for that. But I think they're especially active because of the heat and the rain that we've had this far this season. The weeds are really growing even better. So that's just helps you keep. It's a bit of maintenance now that I think you will thank me for later, because you may not see them reappear like the bellflower. You may not see it this year, and you think, oh, don't worry about it. But then when it comes next year, it is there for a vengeance. So keep on top of that, as well as in your lawn, those peskies. I'm finding clover, although I don't really mind it as much, but I don't know where it came from because I haven't had it in past years, and now my lawn has got a lot of, and they're actually like different size leaves of clover. Like it's a clover leaf, but I have some really big ones that have grown way taller than the lawn, and I've got some that are the same size as the lawn. So I partly think there's stuff mixed in with the salt. I don't know, when the winter salt and that gets piled, and then in the spring we get all this, but that's just my conspiracy theory there. So anyway, back to what you should do in your garden this month. There are a few perennials that maybe in the past you've had to stake, or they've gotten too tall and you've not liked that. Sometimes even phlox can get too tall. I did this already with my hyssop. I love hyssop. The bees love hyssop. A lot of the native tall perennials are very almost too tall sometimes, and then they can fall over or they can shade other perennials. So this is time to do what they call the Chelsea chop. So it will delay blooming, but the end result won't be as tall. So you can go ahead and cut them back, not all the way to the ground, but cut them back halfway, and they will keep growing, and they will eventually bloom, but they won't be as tall and as floppy. And no, nothing wrecks a garden than having string and stakes and holding, pretty flowering perennials up. So I did this with I'm trying to grow hyssop in my backyard, which is a very narrow strip beside the pool. And I know if it gets too tall, it's just going to fall over into the pool. So I was out there last night, and I was, it's probably about 2.5 feet, almost 3 feet tall. And so I cut it back down to 2 feet, and it may not be enough, but I think it will be. And so once it starts growing, I don't want it to get to the four plus height, but I do want it to bloom, and I want it to be a great pollinator this fall. So consider what you can do in your garden. Consider doing the Chelsea chop, which is tied with, doing the trimming of perennials to get a second flush of blooming. So that's a little bit of work in your perennial garden this week. Give it a shot, and I know it will be rewarded. And I'm all about a low maintenance garden. So if you don't want to do any of that, that's okay too. The garden will continue to bloom and continue to be happy. I know it. As far as shrubs go, there really isn't much to do. I do want to remind everybody that, if it bloomed this spring, so this is different than the perennials. If it bloomed this spring, lilacs, wigelia, no, you don't want to do any pruning, because you do not want to. You can do some tidying up and some cleaning up, but you do not want to do any hard pruning to affect next year's blooms. So that's something to think about as well. And your evergreens, your yews and cedars, trim away. You can trim and you can shape them right now. And even a little bit of evergreen fertilizer. I found that the cooler spring made them a little bit, and the harsh winter we had made, especially my yews, like a little bit more brown than usual, a little thinner than usual. So I've done one pass so far of an evergreen fertilizer. And but I think when I did some reading, I didn't water them first. So I think that's the key, is to water them, make sure that soil is nice and wet. And then I did water in the fertilizer. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm okay there, but just making sure it's not like you can sprinkle it on and forget about it. You do need to water it or apply it after a rain. And then that'll kind of feed those roots. And we want to keep our evergreens that we still have really healthy after all that we're dealing with the boxwood. So if you are still fighting if you're still fighting your boxwood, good on you. BTK does work. It does require a couple of treatments and watching for those caterpillars. And so now is a good time to, look, see if you see any webbing, and apply another treatment of BTK. And to update anybody who may not know, BTK is not a chemical. It is a bacteria that is perfectly fine for the pollinators, perfectly fine for you and I, and it coats the leaves, but when the caterpillars eat the leaves, it kills them. So don't worry, there's no environmental impact. It's just a tedious thing to have to do to make sure that you are spraying and coating those leaves well to get on top of the caterpillars on your boxwood. And if it rains hard, then obviously you need to reapply it. So that is another thing to consider. So good luck with that. I still haven't found, aside from yews, and I'm worried about if we plant too many yews to replace all of our boxwoods, and when something comes for the yews, we're all in trouble again. So I do, love my yews, dense yews, hills yews, hicks yews, depending on the size that you want and the area in your garden. But if you're replacing boxwoods, chances are you are looking for dense yews. They will stay lower, but they will grow wider. And you can leave them to join into a hedge, much like you could if you wanted a boxwood hedge. But if you wanted to keep them shaped and, not necessarily round like boxwood, but you can kind of keep them as individual shrubs instead of a long hedge also. So that's something to consider. I am also liking fire chief cedars. They don't look like cedars. The texture's small, they're round. They definitely have that round shape, but they are a little bit more golden with like a little red, hence the fire chief, like a little red hat on them almost. So they're soft, they're fairly slow growing, and so they are a nice substitute if you just are replacing a few of your boxwood. So that's something for your evergreens to do. And now we don't want to do a lot of pruning later in the season. So if there is something you want to prune as far as your yews or your cedars, that type of thing, you want to do it mid-season and to encourage new growth and thickening up and things to get established before we get into the fall and the cooler temperatures and things starting to go dormant. So that is something to remember. And as we head into July, we also are going to start battling. We're battling the moth, the box tree moth that I just mentioned, but then we're going to start battling the Japanese beetles. So July is the time they're going to start to show up. Lots of controversy around the traps. You need one trap. You need it away from your favorite plants. If your neighbor has a trap, then you might need a trap. You do not need a trap because it does cover a large area. So, there's a common belief that the traps just attract more. Some people think that. Some people think the more traps they have, the better. That's also a fallacy. I mean, the traps, their pheromone spread it's attracting, it's out in the air and it is attracting them, and more is not necessarily better. So really communicate if you're, talk to your next door neighbor, because if they've got one hanging in their backyard, you don't need to have one, because then you will be extra, tracking them, trapping them and attracting them. So they do work, but you do really need to read those instructions and consider the distances and the spacing of them and the location. You don't want to put it right beside your roses, because yes, you're attracting them right to the roses. You want them far away in a back corner, side of the garage where there's no plants, something like that. So yes, that is something to consider. And nematodes, that is something we can talk about in the fall. That will help you prevent them establishing in your lawns. I do want you to know, though, when I say about not attracting things to the roses, but I've learned through many clients that the Japanese beetles actually really don't like the annual geraniums, the pelargoniums. So that could be, if you've got your prize roses or a specific thing in your garden that the Japanese beetles love, then that may be, in addition to a trap elsewhere to attract them away from those plants, it may be something to try, is to get one of those shepherd's hooks or move a container near that plant of annual geraniums and have a few of them around, because they really don't like them. And so that could actually be another thing that you try and see if that helps discourage the beetles eating your plants, especially your favorite ones. So that's it about the pests in your garden this time of year to stay on top of. I do want to touch a little bit on the lawn. Now's a good time to, an organic fertilizer if you are wanting to kind of green up your lawn, overseeding your lawn. The key here is water, which, so far everything's still pretty green because we have, it's just the beginning of the month, but we know typically in July, as the heat goes on, lawns start to brown out a little bit and are a little bit more dormant. So the key there is to keep your lawn, don't cut it as often. It's okay. Keep it long. And they actually, your own grass, it just shades its roots and keeps it cooler and really keeps it from drying out. So cutting it super, super short this time of year it's really hard for it to rebound, and it's really will really look more dormant, as it goes dormant if we get a lot of heat. So that's something to consider. Is it's okay to let your lawn go a little long, and I promise you, it will stay greener than if you cut it twice a week. So yes, and organic fertilizer, if you're wanting to fill in some spots and feed it. I like that it's a much slower release and it feeds the soil. That's the goal, is not necessarily stimulating growth rapidly, but you want to improve the lawn soil, and that will get you deeper roots, healthier roots, and therefore healthier grass in the long run. And if you are a vegetable gardener, I am doing some tomatoes and a hot pepper and my little Sicily tomatoes. I'm excited about, and they're doing well. I actually have little tomatoes, and I'm doing lettuce again in my self-watering bed, and I love it, and I'm really happy with the success I've had with my lettuce there. I do need to remember to harvest it and sow some more, so that's on my list this week. But it's still, lettuce is something you can grow. You can give it a little bit more shade, so don't necessarily put lettuce in the full sun. Give it, if it is maybe a spot in your yard that has only morning sun. This is the time of year that the lettuce will be happy with that, to have just morning sun, and it won't bolt. And you can grow lettuce in containers. So that's something you can pop on different variety of lettuce in each container, and it's just sprinkling some seeds. So it's not too late. You can pick up some little baby plants from your local garden center, and then you can also get some seeds at the same time and kind of extend your season. So lettuce is, and we know lettuce is expensive, and I really like that we're growing our own as opposed to imported food. So lettuce is one thing that you can grow fairly easily in the garden. But I think the secret is that part shade. I know in the full sun, it dries out, it bolts, goes to flower. And when I say bolt, it goes, gets really tall and leggy, and then tastes bitter, and you really can't use it. So shout out to growing your own lettuce. That's a baby place to start if you haven't started with cherry tomatoes and easy vegetables like cherry tomatoes and hot peppers. And jalapeno peppers, things like that. I haven't had personally a lot of luck with the big peppers, the sweet peppers, but jalapeno peppers, they love the heat. So if it's a hot summer, they are happy. And the cherry tomatoes, the grape tomatoes, that type of thing are easy to do in a container and great for kids, for them to just pick their tomato off and put them right in their mouth. I think it's a great experience. So give it a go. And did you know, if I haven't done this, I have not ever, I think I may have tried once, but growing your own potatoes. So that's another great activity with the kids. You can get a large pot. You can do it in the ground. They have potato sacks too that you can get, these cloth bags. And if you plant seed potatoes, you got a couple, by mid-July. So if you're listening to this a bit late, but if you plant, seed potatoes or potatoes by the mid-July, you will have potatoes in the fall. So again, it's another, I think, cool activity to do with the kids. Cool way to try and see how you do growing food with like a low entry, low expense, low cost way to do it. So shout out to all your vegetable growers. And I know it's becoming more and more popular because of the food prices. Everybody wants to, grow their own food. So I definitely highly recommend that. And those are some easy things that you can try. Making sure that we are watering. So I'm going to circle back to the water. So far, we have had a lot of water, a lot of rain, a lot of kind of consistent rain. But sometimes as we get more into the rest of the month, we'll get those like flash rains, where it just rains for half an hour and then it really hard for half an hour and then we don't get rain for another week and a half. And we think, oh, well, I don't need to water my lawn. I don't need to water my garden because we did get that, half hour bit of rain. But sometimes if it's really hard and fast, and sometimes we don't know because it happens in the night, a lot of that just runs off and it doesn't really get absorbed by the garden. So please keep an eye and see, you can stick, my good old wooden spoon method of, especially if you have a new garden. Last year, I say take the handle of a wooden spoon. If you're not sure, if your plants are looking kind of odd and you're like, is it too much water? Is it not enough water? What's going on with my plant? Stick the handle of a wooden spoon down. You can use a stick, but I don't know, wooden spoon just seems easier. I have my gardening wooden spoon compared to my kitchen good wooden spoon. But that is a good way for you to see, is the water penetrating? Are the roots getting the moisture, or did it just run off because it came down so fast? So that's my biggest tip, is really, especially the key things, like anything that newly planted this spring, anything that is a little bit pricier. I mean, are your yews, they are pricey and we want to keep them healthy and happy. So are they getting, and they tend to be grown in more of a clay soil in the pot. So they're going to be, and they don't like a ton of water anyway, but they do need water. Your cedar hedges, I get a lot of, by July, we'll get a lot of messages and people talking about what's going on with my cedars. So get out that wooden spoon and double check if you're concerned. I set up my that little tiny garden I mentioned beside my pool. I attached my soaker hose last night and gave everything a good drink to make sure, because again, we get those fast rains and it's only 18 inches next to a fence. How much water, and then concrete, how much water does it get? I never know. So I have a soaker hose buried there, and then I just attach my hose and leave it on for half an hour or so. So there's lots of tips and tricks in watering. I've done past podcasts on watering, so take a look. And thank you for joining me here on Down the Garden Path and talking about July in the garden. If you have questions, please reach out to me, social media, comment on the podcast on my website. Happy to help, happy to answer any questions. And last but not least, check out Down the Garden Path, a step-by-step to your Ontario garden. And there's lots of books that tell you what to do, but not necessarily when to do it. And Matt and I really tried to lay that out to make it as simple as possible for you each month, what to do when and what not to do. So thanks very much, everyone. Thank you for joining me down the garden path.